our meeting for March 23rd. Mr. Alana, will you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Commissioner Brew. Commissioner Shirk.
Here.
Commissioner Templeton.
Here.
Commissioner Wiley.
Here.
Commissioner Zaror.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Sampson.
Here.
Commissioner Dankenbring.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Finke.
Here.
Commissioner Roberson.
Here.
Commissioner Potter. And Chairman Cooney.
Here. Thank you. Mr. Alana, who will be handling the request overview for the staff? Is that you?
Yes, I will
All
give
right.
just the briefest of overview and then turn it over to the applicant.
Certainly.
Northpoint Development LLC has submitted the following incentives for their Eastgate Commerce Center project. One, Chapter 100 property tax abatement with pilot payments to be made based on a dollars per square foot basis as set out and outlined in Exhibit A that you guys should have attached to the written report to City Council. And two, sales tax exemption on construction materials relating to the project. The project is generally situated along Little Blue Parkway, beginning about 3/4 of a mile north of R.D. Mize Road to Truman Road, where it follows Route 78 to M7 Highway. The project will be located on approximately 1,262 acres of real property, depicted in Exhibit 2, also attached to the written report to City Council. And involves the development of a business park and Class A light industrial space with approximately 10 million square feet of building area to be constructed over approximately 15 years. With that, I will turn it over to the applicant to deliver a presentation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Johnny Sweeney. I work with Northpoint Development, and let me see if I can get this up a little bit. There we go. I'm very excited to be here tonight. As I'll get into in a minute, Northpoint is based in Kansas City. This is a project that is very important to us, and really looking forward to speaking to you about it. I would share, if you have questions at any time, please feel free to just jump in. Don't necessarily need to wait till the end. And then I'm joined with a couple members of my team here, Chris Chancellor and Jamie Lamb. So if you have any tough questions, I'll just ask them to come up and take it from there. So with that, going down here, just a quick bit on Northpoint. We are based in Kansas City, so our office is in Riverside, Missouri. And we currently are the largest privately held industrial landlord in the United States. So we're about 10 years old. And we're a long-term holder of our properties. So I'll get into that in a moment, why that's important, but this is an investment that we would be in to stay in for the long haul. And then what I would just point to here at the bottom of the screen, these are some clients that we work with across the country. This is not necessarily to suggest these would be the companies that would be at this development. But these are certainly good examples of clients we work with. And the way these relationships have developed have essentially been, one of them comes to us and says, hey, we need this in this area by this time. And so we tell them we can do it, we perform, we do what we say we're gonna do, and then they say, hey, can you do that again? We need another one. So it's really been a simple secret sauce, but it's following through on our word that's been driving our business. So real quick, we do have core values at Northpoint. So you can see the 5 here at the top of this slide. What I would tell you my experience has been is that these are not just, a poster on a wall that you talk about once a year. These are principles that we operate by, and I think you'll see that by the way we're approaching this project here. And then the bottom left here, just real quick, you'll see us call out some charitable contributions. And with those, what I would tell you that is, it's not only a core value of living generously, but with the support of the city, and if this project proceeds, I think you'll find investment beyond just the project in many other things in your community. So wanted to just speak real quickly to the amount of time and effort we've put into this on the front end. I actually heard Chris say something last night that I thought was really good. I've never heard it boiled down to that. But basically, our community engagement philosophy is let's talk to as many people as we can. And that's truly been the case. I would tell you, Jamie here has led 3 community meetings. We've gotten tremendous engagement, both good, bad, things to work on, what's important to the community. And I think what you'll see here is we've really taken those to heart and made adjustments in the plan along the way. I would give one example is we're currently working on better protecting the Little Blue Trace Trail. We've started to connect with the county. We have a meeting later this week with the county. We think that's going to be a long-term conversation there. And then the second piece here is that I did want to call out is we're anticipating having a workforce training center in this park. And really what that means is we'll build one of our buildings and then we'll dedicate a certain amount of square footage. So let's just say it ends up being about 20,000 square feet. And what we'll do is we'll build it out. We'll build the meeting space, the offices, whatever the local stakeholders demand, and then we'll hand it over to a local stakeholder group, which we anticipate to be really led by school districts, potentially the library, some other local stakeholders, and then they'll run it. We don't pretend to be workforce development experts, so we would basically hand it over to them rent-free. And so it's a tremendous community benefit at the same time, and it's also serving the park. It's a very natural fit. So just real quick, the context of the site we're looking at here. So the only thing I wanted to mention here is you'll see the larger tracts of land are really concentrated on the north end up by the Lake City ammunition plant. And because we've got a site plan here, I'm just going to jump to this. So you may know, you may not, but what are you proposing to do? So what we're proposing to do is to build about 10 million square feet of Class A industrial space along Little Blue Parkway here. We think over the course of about 13 years, what that'll turn into is about 5,000 jobs, and it's going to be a phased project. So the way we're looking at it is that that's going to happen probably a couple buildings a year at a time. Looking at the site plan, I guess I just wanted to call your attention to a couple things. What we estimate right now is about $850 million in capital investment. I know that's changed since we had this number. You all are aware of what's going on in the market, the economy, and that's also just Northpoint's investment. That doesn't count additional things that tenants might put into these buildings, which we'll get into. One thing I would call out here is that with this site plan that you're looking at here, this is even different than 3 weeks ago. So one of the big things we heard at the community meetings is how important the Little Blue Trace Trail is. So we removed 2 of the closest buildings to that. We just took them off the plan. And we've also concentrated, if you look at the far south end there, toward more residential. These are smaller buildings. They're offset from the parkway, and there's also at least 120 feet between them and the trail. And then what we would be doing there is also berming that. So not just a big, mound of dirt, but a berm, potentially some landscaping that's in between the 120 feet. So really providing a nice buffer there as well. So last thing I'll say here, and then jump to the next slide, is why this site, why this area? There's a really strong labor pool here. And so one of the things that's important for us at Northpoint is to be very data-driven with our investments. When you're making an investment this large, you need to have a lot of reasons and a strong business case to do so. And so if you look at this heat map here on your right, I know it's a little bit tough to see, but the point that we really want to call out here is you're going to see a lot of red toward the City of Independence. And what that's driving for us is you have a strong labor pool right in the backyard of this park. You have people that want and fit these jobs. And so this includes a number of different categories, but it does include under and unemployed folks as well. So we're a long-term holder of our buildings, and why is that important to you? The couple of things that, that stand out to us are you're going to get a Class A product. We're not going to build something that we're going to own long-term and then do a half job, not put in two-story windows, not have clear heights of the buildings that aren't built for tomorrow. So what we like to say is we're going to build the building of the future because we need to be able to lease it today and in 10 years again when it's renewal time or when there's a new tenant coming along. One of the most fascinating things to me is what's inside the buildings. This is not like the corner of my basement with a couple boxes and dark and spiders. These are very high-tech, substantial investments being made in the buildings. There's offices inside the buildings. We currently office in one of our buildings, but then also just the amount of technology and equipment is fascinating as well. So as mentioned here by Jordan off the top, we're seeking your support for a Chapter 100 tax abatement and sales tax exemption on construction materials. What I wanted to just quickly walk through with this slide here is we've taken a very thoughtful approach to this, just like we have with the site plan and a whole host of things here, including community engagement. But where we started was the city incentive policy, right? So that's going to drive what the city would support. So if you look at this chart here, it speaks to jobs created on that top row, and then on the left, it speaks to the level of investment. If you go to the bottom right, because we're projecting more than 5,000 jobs and $850 million in investment, it's really TBD for what the city would recommend from an incentive standpoint. So we took that to heart, and what you'll see in just a minute is we didn't say, hey, let's just, let's go way beyond this chart. We're going to try and follow the chart. The other thing we did is we tried to understand what else has been proposed in this area before, and a project nearby proposed something much more aggressive, much less than we would be paying on a per square foot basis. So we've tried to beat that, almost triple it by day one. And then the other component that I would share is we own about 20 million square feet in the Kansas City area. And so we understand the market and what taxes need to be in order to make a project successful. And so jumping down to the bottom here, you'll look at the structure that we're proposing. So it equates to a pilot of 15% from year one. So that's about an 85% abatement and 14 cents per square foot. So we understand the previous proposal was less than 10 cents, sort of scaled in that area. And then instead of going, as you can see at the bottom right of the city's chart, they're saying you could hold that for 17 years. We're saying we don't need to hold it for 17 years. Let's trim 5 years down. Let's go to 12. And then right from that 13th year, let's start scaling up to get closer to full taxes as we go. So on this slide, what I wanted to point out about taxes here, I think this is really important to understand just how our business works, and I'm sure you understand it. Northpoint doesn't pay the taxes, so this is not an ask for, hey, we want Northpoint to pay less in taxes. The tenants pay the taxes. So it's a lease where we pass the taxes through to the tenants. And so really what this is what are the tenants going to be paying in taxes? And we understand in this market where you're going to be competing against. And if you don't have something like this in place, the project won't be successful because they'll go to Lenexa, they'll go north of the river, they'll go to St. Louis, they'll go to Denver. This is kind of what it would take to bring this investment to the community. But 2 points on this slide that I think are very important. That middle section with annual wages, if there are 5,000 people in 13 years, making almost $180 million in annual wages, adding benefits on top of that, certainly there's going to be a lot that are Independence residents. There's also going to be a lot that aren't, but they're going to be spending money in this community too. Anywhere in the country where we do a project, 5,000 jobs and that level of annual wages and benefits is an extremely impactful number. And then on the far right there, those are our projections over 33 years of what would go to the school districts. and then total and property taxes. So over $150 million through the life of 33 years. And what I would say is that's the period where these buildings are in the program that we're proposing. After the program, it's subject to assessments and obviously scales up from there. So this is just a real quick snapshot of what this would mean for each taxing jurisdiction here. So we wanted to look at this both from a 10-year perspective and then a 33-year perspective. And then I know there's a few things on this slide that I've covered before, but do want to certainly respect your time, keep this fairly concise, but obviously happy to answer any questions. I think what I wanted to just wrap up with is this is a very important project to us. I personally have not seen Northpoint dedicate this many people to one specific project. This is in our backyard. We have people that live in the county. We have people that live in the city. We have people that live close to where this project would be. And so all these things that we've done are to take the most thoughtful approach to this that we can. And we just appreciate your consideration. We'd love to be in your community. And with that, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the commission? Go ahead.
You mentioned that there's a meeting with the county, I think later this week, about the Little Blue Trail, is that right?
Yes.
Can you kind of elaborate on what you're looking for there, kind of what your focus is, what you're hoping to gain out of that, or collaboration or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. So we've met with the county back in January, kind of an introductory meeting, and then more recently met with the Parks and Rec staff. And as a follow-up to that meeting, obviously being adjacent to the Little Blue Trace Trail, and then what we're proposing to do from a site development standpoint, there are wetlands here. You have the stream, you have the trail. There's a tremendous amount of coordination that needs to take place, so it's going to focus on the trail and some things that we think we can do to hopefully enhance that, but it also has to do with site development. And the easements and things that would be coordinated to make sure that water is going where it needs to be, and some of the more technical components too, if that makes sense.
So it's more of a developmental design aspect versus like improvements to the trail or anything like that?
That's correct, although we are currently proposing a couple trailheads and some things that we think we can do. There are some areas where I mentioned earlier, where we remove some buildings where there may be easements or opportunities to help buffer the trail further. Certainly don't want to speak out of turn because we need their input and what makes sense, but there may be some things we can do with that too.
Other questions?
So this is a multi-year project. What phase is the workforce training center? When will that be? Will that be early in the project, middle? Or?
I'm gonna say phase one. Yeah, phase one is what we plan on.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you've done to mitigate and or address the concerns of residents living in the New Harmony area or Prairie Landing or even the farmland around that area?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a stab here, and I know Chris and Jamie can certainly chime in if they want. But I'm going to go to this slide here, and one of the things that I mentioned, but I might just kind of go to again at the very southern end there. One of the things we heard from residents on the west of the parkway there is we really don't want to see buildings. Obviously, you go up a hill there, and you're kind of looking down at it, and then especially from the parkway as well. So we're working with a landowner there to actually mix uses. The reason we're not showing it on this plan here is because that's not part of the incentive proposal before you tonight. But as part of that southern stretch there, there's a mix of uses that's going to be probably some sort of retail, office, other businesses, but not our development. So we made the buildings smaller, offset them from the parkway. And then also the types of buildings down there are rear loads. So I kind of, smile and laugh because I'm, still getting familiar with the terminology, but what that really means is you're going to look at the front of nice buildings on the parkway. So this is our building where we office now, and you'd be looking at buildings that look like this. You're not going to see the truck docks from that side. Those are going to be buried in the back. And those buildings also have less docks on them than the larger buildings to the north. So I would say that's probably a really good place to start, is the southern end. And then the other piece that I'd say that's been most clear has really been the trail. I mean, I think we've heard that at every community meeting. We've obviously heard that from the county. And so removing buildings, pushing buildings back from that have really been the things we've been able to do to this point.
So are you cutting square footage down on the Sage side of the project?
I don't know that I looked at that by school district. I could certainly check on that. I would tell you right now the majority of Fort Osage school district was unaffected by that, because Fort Osage is up north toward the ammunition plant, and that's where some of these larger buildings are. So if I can kind of pull that up there, I would say that piece of the plan has been least impacted.
Because that would certainly affect the tax, earnings for the school district.
Yes.
Johnny, can you speak to the phases and which order it goes in based on that map?
Yeah, sure. So I don't necessarily know that I have a pointer, but can you, you
That'll
can
work.
see my mouse, great. So I'm gonna say a couple things, and then Chris can jump up here and say, nope, that's not the current phase. I'm trying to stay up to speed, but what we will probably do is start with one of these two buildings on the southern end here. And then this would be, again, a rear load, smaller scale building geared toward a certain type of tenant. And then we would move up the parkway, and we will probably start with one of these two or this building here. Maybe let you.
Yeah, jump in there real fast. Sorry. So as Johnny was explaining, we'll start with one of these buildings at the south end. And why that's important is a couple of different reasons. One, it's just that perception for tenants when we do tenant tours that if you didn't start down here, by the time you drive that extra mile and a half or whatever up to Truman Road, it's just a different perception, a different feel. So we'll build two buildings generally at once, two different types of buildings. So we'll do this rear load building initially, and then we'll build this larger cross dock. So that'll be in our first phase, both of those buildings. Those are different types of tenants, right? So because, as Johnny explained, these buildings only have docks on one side of the building, on that rear side. So we get a different type of tenant, especially in this business park plan. So that type of tenant is going to be more focused on research and development, and a completely different type of, more like a logistic user that would be in a building like that where it has docks on both sides. And then we'll see, that we have a good mix of these types of buildings as we go through our phasing, so that every time we can have build two buildings, essentially build one type of each. So we like to say, we make suits, right? We have these suits. You need a black suit, we have a black suit. You need a blue suit, we have a blue suit. And so that's what's important to us, is that we have a rear load and a cross dock option pretty much always available. And so as those buildings get leased up, then we move on to the next building and we build the next building. And so as we look at phasing, like I said, we would start with one of these, and this cross dock is our first phase. We would then, in the second phase, call it 18 months later, essentially start with, probably one of these, maybe pick up the second building as our rear load option, and then we would move over and build probably one of the cross docks. And then we would just alternate back and forth as we would essentially move from west to east. And why we would move from west to east largely, I would tell you, is because this really is where all the infrastructure, utility infrastructure is today. So as we move further east, we'll pull that utility infrastructure with us, whether that's water and sewer and power especially, because there is no power availability and there's no water availability on this area over to the east by Lake City currently. So, you know, for us, the cheapest is we, you know, look at development opportunities is to, you know, pull that infrastructure with us as we move across in our phasing. Hopefully I answered that question.
Other questions?
Mark, I have a question about your company. Do you do the construction yourself? Do you hire subcontractors? Or
We hire.
do you pay for getting those and hire subcontractors?
It depends on the market and the project.
Okay, so you don't have your own construction crews?
No.
Second question I have, on the river bottom there, do you anticipate, I think what I saw was that you're gonna do multi-story buildings
In what area? I'm sorry.
all along there, those are gonna be multi-story buildings?
No, these will be single-story buildings. There certainly are some tenants that might, you know, put in a mezzanine or, you know, something like that. But generally, it's you know, just a clear height from floor to ceiling.
Well, the pictures you showed were multi-stories. I think you probably, I would have some questions about the stability in that roof bottom.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, these pictures, are these the pictures you're?
Yeah.
Sure. I think what I would say to that, and again, we office in one of these, is the corner of the building is where we office, and that's where you might see 2 stories. So there's even a picture of this on the far right here. You'll see kind of the bottom there, and then obviously a staircase up. You might have more meeting rooms or offices up there, but that's only in kind of that office portion of the building. The remainder would be more traditional.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
More questions? Good.
Okay, whenever we looked at some of the pictures earlier, and I'm with the Blue Springs School District, and some of that stuff was showing some retail that was on the south end of it and along some of that. Is there any concern about filling that? Because there's a lot of retail and fast food and restaurants along 39 and in that area, Little Brew on further south. Is there any concern about filling that and that stuff setting, you know, as we go?
Thanks for the question, and Chris, you can chime in too. I think from our standpoint, Northpoint doesn't do retail development, so certainly there will be someone that's their expertise for that. The other thing I would say is as the park develops, it becomes more viable when you do have the heads and the people and the investment happening there. But
Yeah, that's exactly it. The reason why that retail component's important, we're not asking for an abatement on that area of the plan, but that area is really important for tenants. So there are a lot of services further down at I-70, but as we build this park out and we get up along 78 Highway, you're gonna have tenant tours. We tour a few times a week with tenants, and we drive the parks. And what's really important to tenants, number one, is how this park looks, right? So they put their corporate branding on a building. They want to put their corporate branding on a building that, in a park that looks, you know, trashy. And so, you know, we take great care in how those buildings look and how the park looks. And so the other thing that's super important to them is, where are these services at, so that when people have a lunch break, they can go get something to eat. And, you know, are they driving 10 minutes or 15 minutes? So those are important aspects to a tenant. Obviously, those jobs and that development will start to drive the retail. I think these jobs will drive single-family development, which in turn will, again, drive that retail development. So I think we believe that there's a market for that. You know, we heard pretty strongly there is no grocery store opportunity for people, you know, in that area to shop at. So that was a pretty major component that we wanted to get added to the business park plan. So we think that, there's limited retail there. I would say compared to the 4 million square feet of retail that was proposed in the Harmony Plan, we probably have about 200,000 square feet of overall retail, which we don't think is aggressive at all. I mean, that's, small community type retail. So.
Other questions? Go ahead.
So the 5,000 jobs, I know that that's over the life, that isn't going to happen obviously up front. That's going to take some time to happen. But do you guys have data on how close they live to where they are working, like how that spans and how that gets bigger, that circumference gets bigger, and how close they live and where they're going to build homes, like you're saying, single family and all that?
We do. We study our parks, especially the ones here. We have some data on that, and what we generally look at and see is there's either a 20 or 25-minute drive time, a circumference. So it doesn't look like, a perfect circle, but it's basically following the roadways. And that's where we see the vast majority coming from. And then depending on the park and the access, you might see that loop out to, 45 minutes if you're sitting on a highway and access is easier.
But is the majority probably closer than that 25 to 45 minutes, I'm assuming?
Yeah, that's right. So, the reason why we look at 20 or 25 minutes is that's really largely what the tenants look for. So when they come into the market, they'll do their own data study, and so we already kind of preemptively do that data study and kind of labor analysis that they'll go through. But they look at a 20 and 25-minute drive time, and they see how many people, the prospective employee pool would be in that 20 to 25-minute drive time area. And when we did that, that's really the data that Johnny was showing you on the heat map. So that's the 15 to 18,000 prospective employee pool. And we're talking about creating essentially 5,000 jobs over, the next decade, which is very achievable. It's very consistent with the number of jobs that we have in our portfolio across the country. So at 122 million square feet, we have about 78,000 people that work in those buildings. So that really equates to closer to about 6,300 jobs that you would create here in a 10 million square foot park. We've kind of compressed that down to 5,000. We don't want to oversell, but logically it could be anywhere between 5,000 and 7,000 jobs. And when you look at creating 5,000 jobs and you have a labor pool, those are really just jobs in independence or employees in independence. But we know that 20 to 25 minutes is also going to pick up a pretty good labor pool in Blue Springs as well. And also in kind of the northeast area as we go up on 24 highway. So we'll probably pick up another 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 prospective employees in that as well. So when tenants come in and they look at that, they're really looking for about a 3 multiplier. So they want to say, like, for every job I need to fill, I'd really love to have, 3 applicants, right? And so, or the ability to get 3 applicants. So they'll look at that. Long term, we'll have 5,000 jobs. We look at it from that perspective to say, that's great if the first 2 tenants come in and we have 1,000 or 1,500 jobs created, but long term, when we want to build out this park and have 5,000 jobs, do we have the pool to be able to pull from? And clearly, very much so. So.
Thank you.
This may be a hard sell or a hard ask to ask you, but when we think about 10 years down the road, it's hard to, I love dreaming that big, but it's hard to fathom what we will actually have. Could you use some of your data in your 10-year history to tell me maybe about a community that's been transformed because of a project you brought in? Or what's going on in Riverside?
Yeah, so that's probably the best example, I guess, is the transformation there. We started probably 9 years ago and developing that park. We've really built that park out, so it's about a little over 5 million square feet on kind of the area where our office is, and then we have, the buildings on the west side of the parkway that a couple are ours, but a lot of them are other developers as well. But that's probably another 4 or 5 million square feet on that side of the parkway. So that's been a huge impact to that community, obviously. And that's pretty consistent job number. So I think I referenced last night that it's about one job for every 2,000 square feet on average. And so that's how we get to our 5,000 jobs at 10 million square feet. But that's pretty consistent with our Horizons Park in Riverside. And that really was built out essentially over the last 10 years. Now it got finished up. We finished our last building there probably 18 months ago. And that building was kind of I would call it a odd building that was kind of on a tract of land that was an odd shape. So took a little creativity to get a building in there. So that one was lagged behind a lot of the other buildings. I would say, this plan is a little bit more straightforward in terms of, the building dimensions. That's also what's important about this plan is I think it lays out really well because what we know about the market in Kansas City in general is that it's really wants to be a 500,000 square foot building market. Just the tenants that you see are 150 to 200,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet. And so you really look at the ability to put 4 tenants in each one of those buildings. And so at 100 to 150,000 square feet per tenant, which is on the average of what we would normally see, that fills up a building pretty easily with those 4 tenants. Now, I say that, and then we'll certainly have a number of buildings that have 2 tenants in them, and so if we're building a 500 or a 600,000 square foot building, it's logical we'd have, a couple of 300,000 square foot tenants in it. They'll take each end. And then we say that, and then in Belton, as an example, we thought we would end up with, multiple tenants there, and we really ended up so far with 3 buildings and 3 tenants. And so, whole building tenants in each one of those buildings. And so, we have Caterpillar in our first building, and then BoxyCharm in our second, and then Chewy, of course, and .com in our third building. So, what we know is that building a building that's in that 500 to 600,000 square foot range in Kansas City, building that speculative, is going to satisfy about 80 to 90% of the prospective tenants that come into the market. So that's why that's important. The way this plan is laid out, it does give us the opportunity, because we're going to get build-to-suit opportunities of people that come in that need 1 million square feet. Those 1 million square foot opportunities are true build-to-suits, because most people don't have 1 million square foot spec laying around for someone to be able to come in and tenant. And so taking, 2 of these buildings and putting them together to get that 1 million square foot opportunity, it kind of gives us the best of both worlds to be able to build spec and to get those smaller tenants. I call them smaller, but 200,000 square foot tenants, not a very small tenant, and then to be able to get to a build to suit that's 1 million square foot. So, we say it's a 13-year build out. I really do feel like, we're wrong every time we guess, because to your point, 10 years is a long time. But Belton's a great example where we said, this is a 5-year, 6-year build out, and we had tenants in all of those buildings in about 18 to 20 months. So, in this environment, I think it's logical that the timeline could be compressed a lot faster than 13 years, but 13 years is what we expect, at least what we project right now.
Other questions?
I've got a question.
Sure.
So Northpoint is the owner and leases the buildings to the tenants, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're the landlord.
You hold the buildings for their life cycle, or?
That's correct.
And what is the life cycle of these buildings?
Well, we haven't experienced the end of a life cycle of one of these buildings yet, because we do not use metal siding and metal building components like that. So, these are generally concrete tilt-up buildings, very durable. I think Johnny alluded to the fact that we build kind of the building, we call it the building of the future. It's not very futuristic looking, but when most of the competition is building these larger buildings at 36-foot clear, we're actually spending a little bit more on building them at 40-foot clear. And that's important because we know tenants over time aren't looking for lower ceiling heights, they're looking for a higher volume. Higher volume also just means that there's less square footage. You can store more stuff in a smaller plan area building. So that's important. And so we kind of try to future-proof these as much as we possibly can. And so we intend to hold the building long-term, which is our business model. So that's very different than some of our competition. Their business model may be more such that, they build a building, lease it, and then sell the building, and that increment that they make is really how they generate profit for their partners. Our partners, I will just tell you, they invest with us because they need long-term cash flow, and so that aligns really well with our value of wanting to hold these buildings long-term. So yeah, I would say, we look at, we always project these out on a 10-year basis, but the reality is these buildings are, 20 or 25 or 30 year pretty easy. So, and we maintain them really well. So it's kind of like saying, what's the life cycle of your home? If you maintain it really well, it's going to be a long time. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? Not seeing anyone. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation tonight. Discussion from the commissioners.
I'd like to hear from the school district representatives on their thoughts of the abatement and the tax credits, et cetera, for Chapter 100.
Whenever I see the dollars and cents, that's great. That's been talked about a lot. The chart obviously shows a great benefit, to all of our school districts. But whenever I see that Northpoint was awarded by the KC Business Journal 8 years in a row, best place to work, I see happy employees, happy families, happy mom and dad, which is what's best for kids.
Yeah.
Ultimately, so we love it from those age.
They've come out and talked to us a couple of different times, I think all of us. And so that's been a great thing. That did not happen before. And so what I saw, and being here 6+ hours last night, thank you very much. You guys did it. In all honesty, you did a great job. I'm poking there a little bit, but you guys were great in handling all that. So anyway, but what I saw last night was a lot of, for those that were wondering, there's a lot of green space, and they're taking care of that and doing it. And from what the plan was, obviously, it's got to come to fruition, which I have the utmost confidence that it will. So that's a good thing in our area because that touches all of us. So that's a good thing. The partnership that we've talked about whenever we've had them in and met with them for our students, sorry about that. And whenever I say our students, I mean all of our students. I'm not just talking about the ones in Blue Springs. To build a partner with some of the companies, some of these, what they're going to bring in and help our students grow, provide those jobs, those opportunities for the ones that want to come straight out of high school or the ones that want to go to college. So I think it's a great thing. The dollars, I'm the CFO for our district, so the dollars are obviously an added benefit. What it is right now, I think that we pull in less than, whenever they showed us the numbers, and I verified in an annual piece, less than $1,000. And whenever this comes to full, whenever that drops off, over $1 million, close to 1.1 or 1.2 million, that's substantial. It won't happen in my career, but for somebody, that's going to be a good thing for all of us. So I would certainly, I'm behind it.
I think also from Independence's standpoint, and I'll just echo a couple of things that they mentioned. Steve happy families, it's obviously important, happy kids. Number for Independence is obviously the largest number of the school district, so we're happy about that. But I'll go on with what Kurt said, and the workforce development piece is really important, and goes along with our academy model. We think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here for tenants to teach our kids, teach our students how to be good employees and build pipelines to jobs that are attractive jobs, and ultimately can impact the keeping of residents here rather than, for lack of a better word, brain drain that could possibly occur. So the other thing I'll say too, and Johnny mentioned this as well, it hadn't been that long ago that when people came to communities to ask for TIF, that they asked for the maximum amount and did it for 25 years. And so the fact that we're seeing benefit in year one and substantial earlier is much better.
Yeah, I'll just add, and I'm with the Independent School District too, that some of you probably were at the groundbreaking when Little Blue Parkway went in. I was. I remember the tent that the city and the Economic Council put up, and Senator Christopher Kit Bond came. He was one of the people that got us the money to put that in. And we were all thinking, oh, in 10 to 15 years, this place is going to be thriving, and here nothing has happened. And so we've talked as a school board before and with some of the administrators is the fact that, like the song goes, it only takes a spark to get a fire going. And we think this is going to be a big impetus to get things moving in the valley after all these years. And it's a great thing. And the Parkway was originally built for this, not for subdivisions, as was brought up by Randall Pratt last night. It was brought about for economic development in Independence and Eastern Jack. And we think that you guys are very good neighbors, and we appreciate all you've done, and we are happy, Independence School District, very happy, all 7 board members with this particular TIF, and appreciate your giving on that and your liberality with that. So we're 100% behind it.
As a Fort Osage school board member, I too am very excited about this. Our district, as you well know, is mostly residential and agriculture. We do not have a lot of businesses, so we depend heavily on state dollars to fund our district. So this could make a huge difference for our district, so it's very, very exciting for us.
And as Kirk referenced earlier, you've been to all of our schools and spoke to our communities, and when you presented to our school board, they were so impressed at the March 8th board meeting that passed a resolution to unanimously support the project.
Other discussion?
I'll just mention that from the county's perspective, the trail system, Jackson County Parks Plus Rec, the trail system is sort of one of the most prideful things that we have. And I appreciate the thoughtful approach to the Little Blue Trace Trail and protecting and improving it in some locations. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
Any other discussion? Not seeing anyone that looks like they want to say anything else. Are we ready then for action? There is a proposed draft report that was in the materials, and we have 3 choices: approval by the City Council, rejection by the City Council, or revision and resubmission of the application to a subsequent meeting of the Commission.
Do you need a motion, Mark?
Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion that the commission recommends approval to the city council.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I do.
Second? Very good. All right. Mr. Orlando, if you'll call the roll then, please.
Yeah, and real quickly before we do that, I did just want to point out for the commissioners and anyone watching at home, under the resolution establishing this commission, when dealing with a multi-jurisdiction project like this, the school districts will each have one vote. We've already discussed that, and that's all been determined. So as we read the roll, they will each have one vote. Commissioner Brew.
Here, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Shirk.
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiley.
Yes.
Commissioner Zaror. Commissioner Davis.
Yes.
Commissioner Sampson. Commissioner Dankenbring.
Yes.
Commissioner Finke.
Yes.
And Chairman Cooney.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.